Welcome, viewers, listeners, what have you. I'm John Webster, and welcome to Cinematic Realms. I'm joined by my normal cohort, Jared Kozel, and a returning guest from last time, Blue Lemons. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
We're it's funny because we took the last 2 weeks off because I was going on vacation. I did not go on vacation, but I was sick, so I'm still glad we had the 2 weeks off. But we're coming back today for a Halloween special. It's a little belated. We're a couple days behind, but
it's always Halloween season if you want it to be.
Yeah. Hi, Jolie. Good to see you.
Hey, Jolie.
Today we will be talking about the Tim Burton 1999 classic Sleepy Hollow. And when we get to the mid-roll, there's actually a few off-topic things that I want to talk about because there's been some stuff going on in other corners of fandom. So, but we'll make a little space for that. I guess we'll just dive right in. This movie is now almost just shy of 25 years old.
Oh my God. Stop.
Which I now have to do like every time I'm I'm talking about one of my old favorites because we're getting old, friends. We really are.
Still young at heart.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? I don't care because these are like my movies. You know, when we talk about this era, specifically like the late 90s, early 2000s, I feel like that hits a sweet spot for me that I just was so in love with the movies of that day, with TV of that day. It really just warms my heart to go back and talk about it. I don't think I saw this in the theater. I think the first time I probably saw it was on home video, good old VHS. Do you guys remember seeing this for the first time?
I believe I did see it in the theater.
I did not. I definitely did not see it in the theater because I would have been 10 years old. I was busy watching The Phantom Menace for the fourth time. But I stumbled across this movie the way you discover all classic movies that you love, channel surfing on cable, on a regular fall afternoon. I think when I was around 17 or 18 years old. So. I watched it all the way through with commercials, and it still held my attention. So I went back and watched it all the way through since.
I will say, Trish, you said something to me in the Slack a couple days ago about the gore of this movie, and I was like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad, was it?" Not compared to something like Sweeney Todd. Which I think Sweeney Todd has the bases covered for like flowing blood. But I had forgotten this movie is quite gory with decapitated heads.
It is.
And all that, especially for the 90s. I feel like we're more used to gratuitous violence and gore nowadays. But back then, it seems like this was more of a... a thing that we weren't very used to. But yeah, every time I saw like it's that first time when Ichabod Crane is like coming up towards the dead body, and then we come around it and we see the decapitated head and the missing head. It's like, ugh.
Well, even from the opening scenes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is like for a Tim Burton movie, I think it was one of those that he doesn't do a lot of gore, but but
No, it's just glorious, and what I like about this movie is the way it's shot and the cinematography. So much is the color is very desaturated. Some of the stuff even looks black and white at times, but that blood is like a bright red, which is wonderful. It's a beautiful contrast. I will say that thinking about when I first saw this, I think I originally saw it like soon after it came out on VHS, but I don't think like I had. But I didn't like fall in love with it immediately because I hadn't yet like. I wasn't a huge fan of Johnny Depp back, I think, when I first saw this, because that was '99, so it was still a couple years before I realized like how good his performances were. But then after Pirates of the Caribbean came out, I started going back to like the library of Johnny Depp performances, especially his work with Tim Burton, like Ed Wood and then this and a lot of other things. And then because he had gone so like far out there with Jack Sparrow, I really had appreciation for the work he was doing here, which compared to Jack Sparrow, it's somewhat more restrained, but also there's some really wonderfully weird, funny touches, that he does in this as well. And I think that's when I really fell in love with this movie, because my tastes were starting to evolve a bit where I was starting to really love the weird and unusual in a way that I don't think I had when I was younger. So
yeah, I watched Pirates before I had ever seen Sleepy Hollow, and so it's kind of interesting to go back and to see some of the quirks and the facial mannerisms and the speech patterns that Johnny Depp employs in the character of Ichabod Crane. You can see the seeds that would become Jack Sparrow there. Like there were a couple of times when he was speaking certain lines in a very specific vocal cadence, and I'm like, if I'd closed my eyes, I would have thought that was a Jack Sparrow line. But obviously, he, Pirates of the Caribbean was really the time when he became a big commercial movie star. Sleepy Hollow is kind of an interesting waypoint because he kind of is still at this time more quirky character actor Johnny Depp, even though he is the leading man in this movie. And it's telling because Ichabod Crane is a very interesting protagonist. Obviously he's based on the legend of Sleepy Hollow, so the character himself is quite famous. But to have Johnny Depp playing this role as a lead in a fairly, major movie and to be this quirky and this, interesting in his performance is actually quite fascinating to see how that, kind of ultimately would launch his career.
Yeah, I'm just remembering with fondness because I had the pleasure of, because I only really became a fan of his with after Pirates of the Caribbean came out. Like it was fun to go back and really get to take in all of his, quirky like character work in the span of a couple months. Just taking in all this stuff, getting to watch this, and Ed Wood is the thing that I constantly like reference because it's just so beautifully twisted and demented. So yeah, no, I love that period of time. Just remembering, getting to absorb all those performances. Because back things have changed a bit over the years, but I know back then, like there was sort of an adage of, any Johnny Depp performance is going to be worth seeing because it's going to be just sort of off the wall, a bit of brilliance, even if the movie surrounding it, isn't great. It'll be worth seeing to just see what he cooks up. So
yeah, it's kind of like that period, like you're saying, this period is sort of a relaunch of his career, because he was a pretty good working actor before this. You know, he was just kind of, let's see, his first role was in horror. He was in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then, you know, I think he did some television. He was on 21 Jump Street, like a cop show. But yeah, then it's like doing like more like, seems like more indie type films, little quirky characters. But then he gets into Edward Scissorhands, and it seems like it just taps into something, and it creates, I guess, like I believe that it was his first film with Tim Burton. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it just starts something. And then I think he did what was the other one? Corpse Bride. He was the voice of a character.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it just, like, it was kind of probably a match made in heaven.
Yeah. No,
oh yeah, Cry Baby too. Yes,
yeah.
I like that movie.
Oh, Kate, jeez, just take that as a given. No, this is a really fun movie. I actually think you would love this, Kate. So it's not you know, The Witch level.
Yeah, there's no vampires, Kate. Don't worry.
This is like more popcorn entertainment.
Yeah.
But still very weird. Like, it, you know, although the picture I'm gonna put up will make it look incredibly freaky, because this guy's in it.
Walken's got a Walken.
As the not quite yet headless horseman, the Hessian. Mm-hmm. I just remember when I saw this movie, and when I was watching it today, I don't think I saw his name in the opening credits. So maybe he was either uncredited for it, or they were holding back for the surprise. But oh my God, just he's so scary. And those teeth, those razor teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's funny because he doesn't actually have a single line of dialogue in the movie other than like yelling and growling and hissing. So he theoretically could have been played by an extra, although actually when it's not Christopher Walken, it's actually Ray Park of Darth Maul fame, who is who is portraying the horseman himself. But the fact that they have Christopher Walken be the Hessian for the scenes when he is you know, he does have his head attached is just one of those little like quirks that makes the movies feel that much more fun and charming, because I think we had been talking about before the stream, this movie is littered with incredible actors in very small, you know, roles. You know, Christopher Lee shows up for one scene in the beginning of the movie, but it's a great scene, and it's also kind of an homage, because what this movie really feels like most, I think, is, and Tim Burton has acknowledged this as his inspiration, is taking off of the old like Hammer Studios classic horror films, which the most famous of which is probably Christopher Lee's run as Dracula. So it's that kind of very stylized, over the top kind of horror, where it is most definitely horror. There is most definitely shocking elements, but it's almost so campy and over the top in your face that it crosses that line from scary into fun. You know?
I feel bad because normally I'd have dug up pictures of every amazing actor who's in this movie, but when it comes to 90s films, you don't have that much of a choice of production stills. There's usually just a few of like the main actors, but I am just going to list off, you know, some of the names in this cast. Of course, you know, Johnny Depp in the lead, and then supporting him is Christina Ricci, who we're going to talk about. But then just this wonderful who's who of actors: Miranda Richardson, Michael Gambon, Jeffrey Jones, Christopher Lee, Richard Griffiths, Ian McDiarmid, Michael Goff. Those are the ones that
either Peter Guinness shows up for in the flashback sequences, and Steve Waddington from Last of the Mohicans. Lots of Alan Armstrong, who I believe was in Braveheart.
Martin Landau.
Yes,
in the
uncredited.
Yeah, which I knew him right off the bat when I saw this when I was younger, because that was, of course, around this time he was a couple years prior. He had a role in the X-Files movie, Fight the Future. He was in that, but what I really knew him from was after Mission Impossible had come out in 1996. I went back and had gotten really into the old TV show, and of course he's in that. And so whenever I saw Martin Landau and him popping up in something in the late 90s, I was like, oh, I know him. So yeah, no, I just like, and so many, you said, Jared, like anybody who's popped up in any British actor who's popped up in like Star Wars or Harry Potter or anything, it's just amazing.
We've got the entire prequel area Sith lineage with Ian McDiarmid's Christopher Lee and Ray Park, and I definitely, when I was watching the movie, I definitely had to consciously avoid doing the game where I was like, oh look, it's Vernon Dursley. Oh look, it's Rita Skeeter. Oh look, it's Dumbledore. And I'm just like, dial it back. These are actors who are playing, characters, even if they like. I saw them first in other more famous things, but this came first, except for the. I think Phantom Menace may have been out by this point, but.
And that was part of the. That was one of the funner things, was the fact that Phantom Menace had just come out. So it's not like we were recognizing Ian McDiarmid from, he played the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. It's like, no, he's Palpatine and he was just in Star Wars this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So this was just a delight going back to this and recognizing all these actors. And then I just kind of laugh because then you've got, what's his name? Casper Van Dien, the heartthrob of the day. And it's like, you see him and you're like, okay, when's this guy going to get killed? And then he does in glorious fashion.
Yeah, actually kind of a surprise, face turn for him. If you know the original story of Sleepy Hollow, you know that he's kind of, supposed to be the mischievous, bad guy who's competing with Ichabod for the heart of Katrina. And in this case, it goes without saying, this is a very loose adaptation of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So that means that they get to do some fun things with the characters. And one of the fun things is they actually get to have Brom, have a nice moment, heroic moment before the horseman bisects him.
But only after he's thoroughly been a dick for a couple scenes.
They do include the nod to Brom's likely role in the original Sleepy Hollow legend when they have the sequence where he is chasing Ichabod disguised as the horseman and throws the pumpkin at his head, which in the original legend is kind of the end of the story, because afterwards Ichabod runs off because he's so scared, and Brom settles down and marries Katrina, and they're like, whatever happened to that horseman guy? And he's kind of like, I don't know. But in this case, there actually is an undead horseman from hell, and so, he didn't take kindly to Brom aping on his work.
I will say, well, that's actually the funny thing. It's like, as Ichabod says, it's like, he's not after you. And it's like, and finally the horseman is like, all right, enough of this shit. Now I'm going to kill you. But I was going to say about the original story, it's funny because I told you guys before, I had just recently gotten the 4K Blu-ray of this, and they have like a little booklet with the original story in the front, and it's just like this original story, which bears very little resemblance to the movie you're about to watch.
Well, it is kind of interesting because, like, I mean, the story does, Ichabod is I believe a school teacher, and not in any way, shape, or form heroic, like as Johnny Depp is, although he does bring some elements of that, into his character. But what a concept to just take this story and be like, no, let's make it a murder mystery and make Ichabod a detective, like. So that makes, I mean, honestly, it's one of those adaptation changes that made it so much better. Like, you get way more story out of it,
Oh, that just reminds me of how much I love all the stuff in the opening. There's something about the way the dialogue is written. It's so, like, of a different age, and it feels mythic almost, the way they're like, Constable Crane, is that you? And he goes, none other. It's like, and not only me, but one also who was recently alive. And then I love when, he's arguing with the the guy in the prison, and the guy is like, hey, dissect him. Are we heathens? And then of course the guys come through, and he's like, what happened to him? It's like, I forget what they say. Like,
they're like, just arrest for burglary, and then they throw him head first into a cell. Just a little casual 18th century police brutality.
Yeah, it's right there at 1799. It's like right there, the beginning of a new century. So it's definitely straddling the old and the new, where Ichabod is very I guess he wants to use scientific methods to solve crimes, and his science is a little dubious, but he's got the spirit, I guess. But everyone around him is basically just still very superstitious and close-minded, and like, if you find a body in the river, he drowned, like, simple as that, like, not even bothering to really even solve crimes beyond, well, that considered solved, but yeah.
No, and I just love then when it cuts to the courthouse, and we've got Christopher Lee. Like, he's in this for exactly like 1 minute, and he makes the most of it because he's so great. And I just love the way he says, found with their heads locked off. It's so great.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Trish, because it's actually one of the things that gives this movie its really added thematic and emotional depth. The idea that Ichabod is kind of a man who wants to be a man of science and sense and reason in this very dark and superstitious and unreasoned time. It comes across aesthetically is very quirky, as John has the image up here, with his little potions that somehow tell him that the head, it was a single stroke of a blade that caused him that took the head off, which I don't know what science that is, but he's also an amateur forensic investigator. He has a little bit of a medical examiner background in there, and it's all very fun and amusing, coupled with Johnny Depp's performance. But we ultimately learn the reason that he is so dedicated to this is because of his background, which is entirely made up for this movie. They invented this backstory for him where he is effectively, the reason he is this way is because he comes from a line where he was very close with his mother, who was very much a free spirit of nature, and intuitive and thoughtful and kind and empathetic, and very domineering. It's implied to be like religious, dogma-oriented father, and that resulted in tragedy for him, where effectively the constraints of the belief system of society led his father to murder his mother in horrific fashion, and effectively stamped out not only his faith, but any of his desire to believe in anything that can't be explained by reason and sense, because effectively his father murdered his mother because of superstition. So naturally he sees that as just nonsense and evil and has repressed that trauma, but he's trying to do something good with this idea of science and reason, which is what makes it fun, that he ultimately comes up against something that cannot be explained by science, that is grounded in devilry and evil, spirits and witchcraft, but he still is determined to, motivated by that ultimate idea that this can't be summary justice, this can't be like a lynch mob mentality. We can solve this, and there must be a man or a sensible reason behind this. And ultimately he is proven right, that this is being driven by, this is ultimately an act of something that can be explained by human behavior, even if the method of death is an unstoppable supernatural force.
Yeah, and I do love, though, when he comes, face to face with that, the horseman is actually real, and then it just cuts to him in the bed, and he's like, I saw him. The horseman is real. And then Michael Gambon's like, yes, we tried to tell you. Oh God, so great.
You get the impression that his science is stuff that he's really only read about and barely put into practice, and so he's kind of going on a lot of faith on that these methods will actually work, and they do get him a little bit further, but yeah, you're right, it's not until he actually realizes it comes face to face with the horseman that he realizes that this is actually a supernatural being, and he's not dealing with a bunch of ignorant hayseeds, like.
God, yeah, it's yeah, no, and I think there is an element of it that is like purposely, like his scientific methods are like purposely over the top, because this is that type of story, and plus it's it's way back when nobody is paying scientific methods any heed anyway. So the more outlandish the stuff looks, like the more effective it is for the story. But
yeah. But it's simply more of him just going around and just doing detective work and talking to people, like that. He really starts not necessarily putting together the how, but the why this is happening, and really looking at who, like just starting with who's related to the victims, and, what conflict or what kind of, like issues did they have going on in their lives at the time of their death, and that usually at least tells you where to go next. But yeah,
and that's actually one of the about like I was going to say about his communication with different people. I love how it kind of points him in the right direction, and one of the parts I love is when Jeffrey Jones' character says, "This is the only book I suggest you read," and we think, oh, he's the priest, so of course he's telling him, forget all your learned books. All you need is the Bible. But really what he's doing is he's giving him a key to understanding because of the family tree that's in that Bible.
Yeah.
And so so it's a whole lot of these connections that make a lot of sense when you go back and rewatch this, but kind of catch you off guard initially. And then and the other guy is, nudging him in the direction of finding out that, of course, the woman who was killed was with child and all that stuff. So he's getting like these hints from all these, different people who are like, are involved in this, but don't want to get themselves in too much trouble.
Yeah. And of course he doesn't realize that he's being handed those clues at first because he is such a man of, science and reason, that when the Reverend plops the Bible in front of him that has the family tree, he's just like, oh yeah, it's the man of the cloth telling me that this can only be explained by faith, which we all know is dangerous nonsense in his mind, both because of his scientific inklings and because of his traumatic backstory. But it makes sense that as he allows himself to become more open to the idea that there is a supernatural element to this, he also becomes more and more convinced that there is a rational explanation for what's going on in the terms of the human motivations behind these murders, which is one of the things that allows him to solve the case. Because even when he's in that moment where he is with the magistrate and the magistrate the horseman comes for the magistrate and kills him right in front of him, he is terrified in that moment because he's seeing the horseman for the first time. But he also manages to realize in that moment that the horseman is not killing at random as a supernatural devil might. Someone is controlling it and giving him orders, and that allows him to get back to his strengths of deducing the relationships and the motivations and figuring out this complex web of ties that allows him to effectively realize that this really all came back down to money and jealousy and greed in the end.
Which just reminded me of when you mentioned when the magistrate is killed and and he sees it for himself. And of course, then when the horseman, goes for the head and, uses the sword, and then of course Ichabod passes out. So that just reminded me of the fact that there's so many parts in this movie where we just see Ichabod faint. And I just love that for the quote unquote hero of the story. Just to see him just pass out multiple times, including the end of the movie.
Or just to see him like lurch a little bit when he sees just something gory or gross and he can barely look at it.
Yeah, when he sees when he sees the decapitated head and he's like, just that weird Johnny Depp facial thing.
Yeah. No, and what he sees is objectively, very gross and disturbing. You see a headless body with a bug crawling out of its neck. Anyone's going to be a little bit like pulling back, but you get the sense that at first the idea is like, well, this guy isn't cut out for this line of work. What is being a police detective if not, dealing with potential like blood and death and everything that seems to give Ichabod the heebie-jeebies. But he's still determined to do it. We see him try to push through his fear, and we know that there's motivation there, that he is actually sincerely interested in not only his scientific methods, but in solving the case and getting, as he said, he stands up for sense and justice. Yeah, which is a fun line and a fun play on words, but it again comes back to his very deep-seated childhood trauma of the fact that his mother was not given a trial. She was summarily executed by his religious father on the basis of pure superstition. So.
Which, by the way, I've forgotten how horrific that was. Maybe I just blocked it out from.
Yeah.
From
oh yeah, no, that. Well, I mentioned that I first saw this movie on cable, and one of the first scenes that I remember seeing was the scene where young Ichabod finds his mother in the Iron Maiden, and the doors open, and a torrent of blood comes out with her, like, sightless corpse thrust towards him. And I not knowing at the time what the movie was, my response was, "What the?" But I kept watching, and that it actually, it makes more sense in context, even though it is such a, like, horrific image.
Yeah, I don't know that I completely understood what was being depicted when I first saw this when I was young. I guess I wasn't that young. I was 14, but it's just, you're being like, there's a lot of sort of obscure images, and the way it's depicted is kind of, it's like there's a lot that's kind of more hinted at as to what's going on, and then you get to that. And so maybe when I was younger, I just wasn't, like I was saying, just stay focused on the fun, John, and don't dwell on the horrific. But that really stuck out to me when I was watching it today. I was like, oh God, yeah. But yeah, and it adds, like, it's just like when you watch the movie through that lens of the trauma that he's gone through, and so much of his character arc just makes sense in that context that I don't think I absorbed when I was younger.
Yeah, and the actress who plays Ichabod's mother in those flashback scenes, her name is Lisa Marie. She's another actor who in the movie, like, really doesn't have any dialogue, but she manages to convey this intensely warm and comforting presence that makes you feel the love that she has for her son and that he would have for her, and the horror of having that taken away. And interestingly, I didn't know this until I did the Wikipedia dive. Lisa Marie, at this time that this movie was made, was married to Tim Burton. So that's kind of, explains how, like, why he would, it's frame her as this kind of angelic good, even, if she meets a horrific end.
Sorry, go ahead, Trish.
Oh no, I was going to say, it's just like how much it's interesting how much, like, witchcraft plays into this story, where it's like both kind of seen as something positive, as long as it's maybe kept, kind of subtle, but as soon as it gets, like, a little bit darker, it's like such a double-edged sword. It seems like there's a lot of people that still believe in witchcraft, still utilize witchcraft, especially in these, like, especially in a little hamlet like Sleepy Hollow, and it's kind of like an open secret about it, and you can use it to, like, ward off evil and things like that. But then the other side of it is, we find out later that Miranda Richardson's character, Lady
Van Tassel.
Yeah, her mother was accused of witchcraft and basically went driven into exile in the woods. So it's kind of like, but we don't find that out. But it's kind of like witchcraft is also the red herring that starts, like, pointing the finger for a while at Katrina being the suspect.
And then also, in addition to her mother being accused of it, then we see that her sister also has turned to witchcraft.
Definitely witch.
And she definitely evokes images from, like, The Witch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, they definitely looks like similar dwelling structure, and and the sequence of where, you know, Ichabod goes to seek answers from her is very much out of the classic, you know, Witch of the Wood kind of story and archetype. But it is interesting that that character, though she has all the iconography of the evil witch in the woods that these kind of 18th century colonists would fear, she actually is kind of a benevolent figure, you know, googly eyes and horrific tongue and corpse, you know, devil possession aside, she helps Ichabod, tells him where to find the horseman. And Katrina has her elements of witchcraft as well. She draws that protective symbol that Ichabod initially mistakes as like a malevolent, you know, symbol, but turns out to be a symbol of protection for those that we love. So and then there's Ichabod's mother. So all of the most of the so-called witches in the movie are actually, you know, turn out to be either harmless or actually benevolent figures. And what's interesting is that the evil witch in this movie, Lady Van Tassel, other than the fact that she has managed to take the horseman's skull and has sold her soul to the devil effectively so that she has control over him, we don't see her doing a lot of like witchy magic stuff otherwise. She is really just kind of a very petty, like vengeful, angry person who is committing these crimes like effectively for her own selfish ends, and that ends up being her doom because she made a literal deal with the devil. And once the time comes, you know, the devil doesn't care that she didn't get everything she wanted. He makes her hold up the end of the bargain and literally takes her back to hell. So it's
I did like it's so beautifully campy the way she wakes up, and then the Hessian just goes in for the kiss with his razor teeth. It's so absurd and so wonderfully, like I said, campy. That's you know, it's just absolutely perfect. But no, what I was going to say is, cycling back for a second, you're right. And the sister is very much like she helps Ichabod. But at the same time, having just come off of watching The Witch, it was so funny because when she says to young Masbeth, like to leave, I'm like, count yourself lucky, dude. That's not normally the way these things go.
Yeah.
But no, she proved helpful, but then, oh God, she pays for it because then the actual wicked sister takes her out. So
yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, yeah, Lady Van Tassel is very vengeful and petty, but at the same time, though, like there is a element of sympathy for her too, because yeah, it's like when you find out that her family lived was on a farm where the Van Tassels currently live, and they were I guess farmers that rented land from Van Garrett, and when their father died, it left them destitute. They could no longer pay the rent, so they got evicted off the land, and nobody else would take them in because they didn't. Because the mother was suspected of witchcraft, the Van Tassels take over that farm and prosper. And so, I mean, she goes about that vengeance. I mean, did the Van Tassels really do her wrong, or was it Van Garrett? Yeah, what happened to them? Their family was tragic. They never should have been exiled like that. But yeah, she does take her vengeance overboard, and she really does not care who she kills in order to get what she thinks is rightfully hers. So she has no problem even killing her own sister for that.
But it's so fun to watch Miranda Richardson play evil and and deliver those wonderful monologues. That's always loads of fun. But yeah, and Jolie's right. She's just angry at the world. Like at that point, she doesn't really care who she hurts to make sure that things go good for her, and she gets what she's owed. Basically, is her primary concern.
Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny, someone wise once said. But he was short and green and very, very old. But yeah, like, it's the people who had directly wronged Lady Van Tassel as a child was definitely Van Garrett, arguably as well. The Van Tassels being granted that land, although Katrina, was a child. The original Lady Van Tassel, hadn't done anything directly to her, but she essentially loses herself on the path of vengeance because she comes up with a plan that she's not just going to get revenge for what happens to her. She's going to take it all. So she ingratiates herself into the Van Tassel's household, poisons effectively the original Lady Van Tassel, marries Baltus, and then conspires to have essentially anyone who could come into between her and claiming the inheritance rights killed. And so you can see where she started out with an understandable motivation, but she just, lost herself again, in this case, by making a literal deal with the devil, who, it's not going to be easily satiated, and so she gets pretty far down the road, but the bill always comes due.
I love how that's not even a figurative deal with the devil. She flat out says, I swore to Satan. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I find it amusing to picture the little girl who snapped the twig at the Hessian and then walks in, like, getting down on her knees and being like, "Dear Satan, please, please, please raise me an undead hell monster to wreak vengeance upon those who have wronged me."
Oh, and that's another great thing. Just going back to that whole flashback with the Hessian, the imagery just all throughout that is so, like, I mean, the cinematography across this whole film is gorgeous, but I just love the imagery of the Hessian, like, fighting off, the soldiers, and then him against the backdrop of, like, I think it's like a fiery sky or something like that, and just growling with those teeth. It's so utterly brilliant. Yeah.
All the design elements of this movie are top notch. I believe it got 3 Oscar nominations for cinematography, for costume design, and it actually won for art direction or production design. And you can see why, because it looks, it looks beautiful and distinctive, and like very much of a kind of a darkly realized something that could have come out of your imagination, but also seems very plausible and realistic. So I think it's just top-notch work all around.
Oh, I'm gonna get very like film lover geeky right here, because one of the things that was immediately apparent to me on this rewatch, and like I said, they recently remastered this in 4K, so it was just gorgeous to look at. But the fact that this is back in the days when they were shooting everything on film, and you can just tell this film just looks beautiful. And this is where I get a little technical, and people are like, "Oh God, John," but with digital cinematography, like, a natural byproduct of that is that you don't really have those deep black levels of film. And there's so much like inky black in the cinematography for this movie. There's parts of it that, like, where the picture, like, parts of the image will be black, like the costumes they're wearing, and it almost like some of the details sometimes disappear into the blackness, but that's very much on purpose, and the style of the cinematography. And I'm just like, man, I miss when movies looked like this. But I digress. So yeah, I was going to save until after we came back from the mid break, but I guess we can start a little bit. Now we haven't really delved into the wonderful Christina Ricci as Katrina. She's just fantastic. This was I'm trying to think. I think the only thing I remembered her from before this was, of course, the Addams Family. Which she's iconic in that. But she was just great in this kind of, otherworldly in a way that, I don't know if I really believe that she was behind it all, but you could kind of like see where you're meant to suspect that a little bit. And, but no, I just thought she gave a beautiful performance.
Yeah. No, she has very much a like kind of an innocent quality to her in this that makes her feel weirdly like out of place with the kind of dark horror of the general ambiance. There's a reason why I believe that she's one of the only characters in the movie who primarily wears white in a very dark, where most people are wearing very drab browns and blacks and those kind of colors, and it helps her stand out both literally and figuratively to Ichabod. I believe there's the lovely scene where when he's searching for the horseman grave and she follows him, and and he asks her why she came, and she's like, because no one else would go with you. And then he's like, well, I'm now twice the man, and it's because of your white magic. And it's kind of, she has that almost like angelic quality to her that makes you believe that Ichabod would fall for her in such short order. But also, once you start to question everything, you can see why Ichabod, who is very much kind of a reasonable man, but is also seeing things that he can't explain, might start to wonder if that kind of angelic presentation is a facade that's hiding like an evil intentions or an evil heart. I think I think there's an exchange he has with Mazbeth where Mazbeth says to him, a strange sort of witch with a kind and loving heart. How can you think so? And Ichabod says, I have good reason. And then young Mazbeth says, well, then you are bewitched by reason. And he retorts, well, I am beaten down by it. Because he doesn't know what to think anymore. But
yeah, and then he says something to the effect of it's a hard lesson, but oh god, what is it exactly he says? But the
I'll try to look it up.
I can't remember what the line is, but the gist of it is that even evil things can have a fair appearance, and but it's said much better than that. But and that rings true because that of course is the real world that we live in, and that very much rings true to our experiences and stuff. But also this is a movie, and we don't want we don't want that to be true. But I was going to say, just putting that image back up, it's like when you consider everything else in this movie, and she does have an angelic appearance. Like she almost looks like she comes out of some 80s fantasy film,
This specific image that you have on the screen very much is like the fairy tale image with the prince and the princess, crossing paths in the dark wood. So it's the movie plays with that iconography really, really well. And ultimately, Katrina is a person with a good heart. she is true. She does love Ichabod. It just is kind of part of the trial that he has to go through in order to see what's there.
Yeah, I think the movie also shows that Ichabod definitely makes comparisons between Katrina and his mother. Like, I think he later has a dream or a vision of his mother doing that blindfolded pickety witch game, and he has a vision of that too, which is like, we know he saw that the first time he met Katrina, so he obviously sees a lot of his own mom in her. I make of that what you will. but I mean, but all good, all good things, it's that kindness and that warmth that he, I guess, has been bereft of for a long time, is bewitching. But yeah, but of course, that can be ripped away really quickly. So I think it is, and yeah, there is good reason to think Katrina could be a suspect because of who stands to benefit from these killings. But that doesn't tell the whole story. So I mean, he is right in a way that evil can have a fair face because Lady Van Tassel is very beautiful, so.
Yeah, I will say, if I had seen this for the first time when I was older and had already seen Miranda Richardson and a good number of things, I would have been like right off the bat, it's her. She's the one.
Yeah.
But also, in fairness, though, like the whole, like we discussed before, the whole supporting cast is a who's who of like British character actors, and any number of them I could point at and be like, just because of who they are, I suspect them to be the villain. I mean, we got freaking Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah, who just plays you would expect him to be like super evil, and he's just kind of a lovable dweeb. Who has a crush on the serving girl.
I love it when Ichabod busts in and he's like, "We need to operate immediately," and he's like, "She's already dead."
Yeah.
Of course, when we say operate, we mean we will need the operating table.
Yes. As someone who went to medical school, I can say that 18th century medical school, you probably didn't, even back then, you probably didn't need to go to figure out that, the headless person's dead, and he's got a different reason for wanting to operate on her. But yeah, it's kind of an amusing, like, it's an amusing character quirk, but
it is. But I mean, that comes from a day too where it was very autopsies were controversial, very controversial. Yeah. And it was even very controversial for even medical science to use dead bodies, and like, so sometimes a lot of medical schools would get the bodies of dead criminals, and people who were basically died in the slums, nameless, and couldn't afford, their families couldn't afford burials if they had burials, and that that's where a lot of medical knowledge came from. So, but these people not knowing what an autopsy is, or being appalled at the idea of an autopsy, would probably be like, not that shocking. So like, if there's not really understanding what he's meaning is like, what do you mean operate? Like, you really, you don't cut up a dead body. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then of course it's even worse when then he comes outside and he's all covered in blood. And they're like, "What have you done?"
Yeah.
And then the way he says, "We are dealing with a madman."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the over the top that saves it from being really gory and horrific.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of good blood effects in this movie. You know, blood squirting. You know, whether it's from the dead body, whether it's from the tree. You know, good on Ichabod for wearing eye protection.
Oh,
because
this part right here. This part right here, where then the blood squirts right in his face. Yeah.
But yeah, it's they play with that idea that Trish was mentioning about the reluctance to examine bodies a bit in that opening scene where he finds that corpse in the river and he wants to dissect it to figure out the cause of death and examine the pathology, and the administrator is basically like, we found him in the river, that means he drowned. So but there is obviously still a religious, region behind a lot of that. The idea that, like, well, you're cutting up the body, that's the devil's work. And that's kind of what Ichabod is trying to combat with his scientific techniques. Like, no, these are tools that we can use, as reason. We have to use our brains, not just follow our blind faith here.
By the way, speaking of character actors, that character, the High Constable, is played by an actor. His name is Alan Armstrong, and because we just recently did. Oh, sorry, I lost my camera.
Yeah, I think John was about to say that he.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
That actor's in Braveheart, right?
Yeah, we just did a stream on Braveheart not too long ago, and he's in that. He gets his head bashed in that one. And so it was. I just remember it being a joy, seeing actors in bit parts like that.
He does a lot of acting with those eyebrows.
Yeah,
a lot of his acting is right here.
I think actually he was also in he played on stage in Les Miserables. He was what's the character's name? Oh man, I keep losing my camera shot. The character who plays the Master of the House song in Les Miserables. Yeah, I probably would need to do a musical theater stream to get any traction on that one. Hold on. I'm going to have my shot back in a second, I swear.
It's your camera that's acting up this time.
Yeah, I know. I really need to get a new camera because it's the actual plug that is the issue. I don't know. Say something interesting, guys, while I figure this out.
So one thing just because we've been talking about, the idea of Katrina not being what she seemed, or at least not appearing to be what she seemed, that kind of plays into two lines that I thought were really important in terms of the thematic ideas, which were when they have that lovely scene in the ruins of the cabin where Katrina is showing him the house that she used to live in, and they have the conversation about the cardinal, and Ichabod shows her the little disc that he used as the cardinal on one side and the cage on the other that he spins and creates an illusion of the cardinal in the cage. And she calls it magic, and he's like, no, it's what we call optics. But the idea is kind of there's a similar principle there where he says it is truth, but truth is not always appearance. And that's really what he's kind of ultimately trying to get to the heart of. And when he starts to question it later in the movie, and it becomes kind of conflated with the supernatural, he has what's probably my favorite line in the movie. Which is, quote, villainy villainy wears many masks, but none so dangerous as the mask of virtue, which is...
That's the line.
Yeah. And that comes into play constantly throughout the movie, most going all the way back to his father, who was, a religious cleric who used his authority and his power and his aura as a man of God to commit, unspeakable horrors, including murdering Ichabod's mother to save her soul under the mask of so-called virtue. And then we have, all of these town elders who are acting up in ways that seem very pious and high and mighty, but are concealing a dark secret and trying to prevent people from looking where they probably should be looking. And of course, Lady Van Tassel is masquerading as the respectable woman when she's literally the devil's bride in effect. So, but it stands to reason that Ichabod would start to question everything, including Katrina, who is in fact what she appears to be, a virtuous woman who loves him. But, the act of actually discerning between the two is the lesson that Ichabod learns in this movie. And he learns that it's not just a matter of scientific sense and reason. It's really, he has to learn to take a few things effectively on faith in order to actually apply that same sense and get the answer that he needs to solve the case.
Yeah. I want to go ahead and stop there for a moment because we're a little over halfway through. So I just want to go ahead and do the mid-roll. Thanks everybody who's tuned in live. Love you guys. Next week, I actually haven't talked about this with you, Jared, but I had to put something in there, so I thought we've been talking about it, so let's go ahead and do the Banshees of Inisherin next week. How do you feel about that?
I feel great. I saw you updated it on the Google Doc later, and I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah,
we're 1 year anniversary, basically.
Yeah, both of us. It was one of our top films of last year, and as a big fan of In Bruges, I was really looking forward to this one, the reuniting of Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell. But it's somehow even more heartbreaking in this one than in Bruges. So yeah, looking forward to that, and then we'll talk about what's coming up the week after that, and then I think we've got some stuff planned already for after that. So we'll figure it all out as we get further down the line. But also just side note, I'm kind of hoping this will be the last time I have to mention this, but we'd like to ask you guys if you've enjoyed these film conversations, please do support the Screen Actors Guild, who are currently still on strike. I've got some links in the description for in ways that you can help them out and donate money if you're so inclined. It does seem like we might, fingers crossed, be seeing the end of the tunnel with this finally, because they're SAG and the studios are meeting over the weekend to continue talking. And when the studios are working on the weekend, that probably means they want to get these things wrapped up. So fingers crossed. And as far there are a couple things I want to touch on before we get back into the discussion, but anything either of you want to plug or let people know about?
Not really at this time, no.
Okay. Cool. I do just want to geek out on a couple of things, which I've alluded to already in this stream, but I don't know if you and I talked about it, Jared, but I finally did watch The Witch, which after our discussion of The Northman, I'm so excited to finally watch that, but oh my God, it freaked me out.
Yes, I vividly remember seeing your reaction in the Hear Me Dragon Slack, that you're just tagging both me and Trish and going, "What the bleepity bleep bleep," in all caps.
Like, just even right off the beginning, I won't, for people who haven't seen it, I was probably the last person on earth, but like after the baby disappears, in the beginning. Immediately following that, I was like, what the fuck am I watching? Oh my God. Absolutely terrified. And then the ending of the movie, I was just like, you know, part of me was like, what the fuck just happened? What? But it was beautiful. But it was extremely freaky.
Yeah, it was that was I remember watching it for the first time at not knowing anything about it going into it, other than the fact that there would be a witch and that there was an evil goat who might be the devil, and the fact that they managed to play with this very simple, like, you know, set and, you know, very isolated location to really like just give you this looming sense of impending dread. Those are the horror movies I really like. The movie has almost no jump scares, but it sets into your bones that you're just going to feel like terrified. And then by the end of it, you're like, well, this is the only way it could have ended.
This is how screwed up I am. Like, I am not a fan of like traditional jump scare horror movies. Although they're still those jump scares are very effective on me if I happen to be watching something with them. But I always liked it when primarily the type of horror that I'm watching is the type that like slowly kind of creeps up on you, and it is just like making you as disturbed and and freaked out as possible, which is weird that I like doing that to myself, but you know what, and that's why I love Alien so much, because I always feel like Alien is just one of those movies that it's just like, it's the dread of the thing, and then the same thing with this, where it's just like, you know, the awful is coming, and you can't do anything to stop it. And like when, you know, and when the boy is walking up to the witch's hut, I'm like, no. So yeah, I just had to bask in this for a couple of minutes with you guys, because it is one of the freakiest movies I've ever seen, and I loved it. I thought it was great.
Wait till he gets to the lighthouse.
Yeah, I've got that. I went out to Target and I picked up, it was on sale for just $5. So I was like, oh my God, I can't pass that up. So I'm going to do that very, very soon.
Nice.
The lighthouse is not nearly as scary as the witch. It's just twisted.
Weird. It's just very, very
twisted.
Ooh, Petar, I have seen the others. As a matter of fact, if you want to go back, AR and I did a stream on that back in the day when she was on here as my co-host. We did it for one of the Halloween streams. So definitely check that out. I loved it. And I just recently got the 4K Blu-ray of that, and I'm happy to say it looks freaking gorgeous. So I'll be revisiting that pretty soon. Now I want to switch gears for a second, and I promise we'll get back to the discussion, but they're just like some things that this is the time to get it out and then talk about it. I don't remember how much either of you are into the Marvel stuff, but they just announced today that a new division of Marvel Studios is being established called Marvel Spotlight, where it's going to be more character-driven, like not as tied into the larger continuity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The stories, the first one is going to be the series Echo, which is coming out next year, and it's going to be rated TVMA, which is, and if the trailer that they put out, it looks very much of a style with the like the Netflix Marvel shows. It very much has that vibe. I don't know if either of you are interested in that at all, but I was very excited because this is the kind of thing I've been, as a fan of Marvel things, but not necessarily, everybody knows I've never been the biggest MCU fan, but this has me very excited because I think it's a unique new direction for them to go in. And, you know, I'd love to see the Marvel Studios tackle stuff that's in line with Daredevil, or even, fingers crossed, one day Legion. I don't know if either of you ever saw that series, but it makes me very excited if they're starting to move in that direction of trying out some new things. But
that would be interesting. I would check it out. I mean, because like I really loved a lot of the Marvel Netflix shows. They were great. So
yeah,
I'm much more interested in that kind of level of storytelling rather than no shade to anything, but like the next big apocalyptic event, and
and I think
that kind of storytelling.
And I think they know that people are starting to get a bit fatigued with that. So I think they're wanting to vary up the kind of stuff they're doing. And they, in the press release, they very specifically said that the Marvel Spotlight stuff will focus on like street level stakes, which is funny because that's the exact same language Netflix used for their Marvel shows. So I don't think that's an accident. I think they're very much, trying to go in that direction for some of this stuff.
Yeah, I had only just seen the Marvel Spotlight announcement, hadn't really delved into it. I had been reading a lot of articles in the preceding week, basically those classic behind the scenes articles from the trades, basically being like chaos behind the scenes at Marvel Studios. And, some of it was, I'm like, I'm not ready to write their obituary just yet, but it's clear that there is a problem here. They probably did overextend themselves a little bit when they went from going to basically 2 to 3 movies a year to 2 or 3 movies plus 4 or 5 Disney Plus shows. And while I actually have really liked most of the Marvel content, I have found myself pulling back from it a bit, whether or not it's because there was so much of it or there were a couple series that I didn't love as much. Some of them I really did. One of them I did really enjoy was Hawkeye. And I did enjoy the character of Echo in that show, and so I was interested in her series. But when I just saw the trailer in the past couple days, I'm like, oh, they're actually doing something really different, at least in terms of tone with this.
Yeah.
And it might be more of an old is new again kind of thing, because it does look more like the Netflix shows, which I didn't watch all of those. I think I watched maybe the first season of Daredevil and part of Jessica Jones before I kind of tailed off on those. But I get that people love those shows, so I feel like it's nice that if they are going to do a little bit of a creative recalibration, they're going to allow space for something like this, particularly with a character like Echo, who is very unique in that she is a deaf Native American woman leading her own show, and it's going to be like a dark kind of gangster drama. That's a cool direction to explore, even outside of the Marvel characters. But it's going to have Kingpin and Daredevil in it, so let's go.
I will say the thing about I enjoyed Hawkeye. Didn't love it. I think of the Disney Plus shows, the one I've really been a huge fan of has been Loki, which I love the sci-fi concept. But Hawkeye was still enjoyable, but there was a bit of it for me like, this is the thing that you choose to bring Kingpin in for the lighthearted Christmas series. Just because in the Netflix shows he was always like beating somebody to a bloody pulp, and so seeing the trailer for Echo, I was like, there we go. That's the Wilson Fisk I know. But anyway, so I just wanted to talk about that because I'm actually really very excited for it and looking forward to seeing what they do with that. And hi, Cassie. Thanks for stopping in. You're probably wondering, wait, is this an MCU stream? No, it's not. We're just doing the mid-roll, and we took a little break. So I don't know, anything on your guys' mind before we go back into talking about Sleepy Hollow?
Just like I still have a list of movies I'm trying to get you to watch with me. So
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know.
I know. Like I'm so sorry you couldn't see Lost Boys. Me and Laura had such a good time with that. We were laughing so hard.
Yeah, that was a tense night in the Webster household.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. Yeah.
So
I'm always up to revisit these things.
So going down to the living room, putting on some headphones, getting the computer out, and typing away in the chat room was not the, let's just say it's not the optics I was going for with a certain family member that night.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha. And of course, like I know you are always up for Aliens, but like I'm definitely down for some Predator movies. So
yeah, it's been a while since I saw. I think the only ones I've ever seen, honestly, were the original and Predator 2. Like those are the only ones.
In that case, I would make a strong recommendation for Prey if you have not seen it.
Oh yes,
I actually recently bought that just because I've heard so many good things about it. So yeah, I will be watching that soon. But in terms of the original Predator, it's been years since I've seen it, so that would be a lot of fun to do a watch party for. They'll like. I just remember that they're in the jungle, and at some point, Arnie says, "Get to the chopper."
Oh, there's a lot of great lines in that.
Yeah, if it bleeds, we can kill it. That's
okay.
Yeah, there's a callback to that in Prey as well. Prey is actually, like, even as someone who wasn't very invested in the Predator franchise beyond the original movie, I just found Prey to be like an outstanding kind of low budget sci-fi kind of horror movie. Very, very unique because the concept is it takes it back to the Native American, way of life long before any of the original movies, and it focuses on a young woman who wants to prove herself as the hunter against the ultimate hunter. It was great. I actually have it in my top 10 movies last year. I just found it to be good. And especially if you watch it in the original Comanche dialogue.
I will say I bought it for two reasons. One, because I had heard so many great things about it, and two, because I'm trying to support all of these initial like Disney streaming only Blu-ray releases, because we want to make sure that they keep doing this, because I want Andor, I want Clone Wars season 7 on Blu-ray and a good number of other things. So yeah. But okay, so I think we've officially sidetracked enough. Let's jump back into Sleepy Hollow. I don't even remember where we left off.
We were talking about Christina Ricci, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Well, that's always a good idea. Really. No, I just, and I think we're talking about also the part where somebody had mentioned the scene where Johnny Depp first comes into the house and she's like playing the game, and then I forget what she feels his face, and it's like, Theodore, is that you or something? And then he's like, no, ma'am, just a stranger. And then she says, have a kiss on account, which then gets Casper Van Dien's character very upset since he was next in line. But no, she's great in this movie. I loved her dynamic with Johnny Depp in the film, and again, like we said it before, but I think she adds a real fairy tale-esque component to the movie, where everything else is steeped in like dark horror, and she's just so angelic and offers like a sort of lightness to the whole film.
Yeah, their love story is very, very sweet. And Christina Ricci brings a lot to the performance, because I do think Katrina is kind of an underwritten character at parts, but she does still manage to bring elements to that dynamic that makes you feel like she has a true like sharpness and a wit to her, and a truly good heart, and is someone who could, as Ichabod later says, like bewitch him in such a short period of time. I love there's a lovely little scene that's a callback to the initial scene where she kisses him with the blindfold, where Ichabod seems about ready to give up, and Katrina asks him, like, will you take nothing from Sleepy Hollow that was worth the coming here? And he says, no, not nothing. A kiss from a lovely young woman before she saw my face or knew my name. And she kind of smiles softly and says, yes, without sense or reason. And I just love that moment, because it not only plays on the idea of Ichabod being such like a sensible man who came here to solve a crime that he didn't expect to have supernatural elements, but he also didn't expect to fall in love. And it's, that becomes a very important thing for him throughout the movie. And also, when it looks like he believes that Katrina could be the one behind this, you see he is like genuinely brokenhearted. The idea that he's ready to go back, and he's like, my life is over. I've been spared effectively for a nighttime of horrors in my sleep and a broken heart, which is ultimately not the fate that awaits him, because he gets his happy ending at the end with her and with young Masbeth, who kind of becomes a surrogate son almost in a way. So they it's kind of one of those found family dynamics but it feels authentic. It feels, genuine that these people could have found each other amidst such, horror.
I do love that his dynamic with Masbeth starts off where he says, I cannot be the one to look after you, and then as it turns out, well, yeah, you can. No, I'm always a sucker for found family stories, just because that resonates so much with me, just because you guys and the rest of the Here Be Dragons crew, y'all are my found family, so so I love that stuff.
That is a brave kid, man. He really is. He's the MVP of the story sometimes. He's the first one to sign up to go do all the really scary stuff with him.
Oh my God. Wait. I just have to say, like, one of the most hilarious parts of this movie is how Ichabod keeps shoving him in front wherever they go.
Yeah.
Was like,
oh yeah, him using him as a human shield when they're entering the witch's den is hilarious. Not very heroic on Ichabod's part, but it doesn't come across as obnoxious. It comes across as just he's kind of a little bit of a he's squeamish. He's afraid, but he will ultimately do it when it comes down to it. And young Masbeth is just loyal and true to the end. But I also love probably the hardest I laughed in the entire movie was after that scene where they visit the witch and she has her googly eyes that come out on the stalk and terrifies Ichabod, and then we just cut to the Masbeth sitting outside and the Ichabod like pops out and is like walking very quickly. He's like, we're leaving. We're leaving now.
Boy, she really didn't check the chains that much.
No. Yeah.
You know, she's like those chains had a lot more slack in them. So, like,
Oh god.
Yeah, it is a fun dynamic. I saw that Cassie actually shouted out in the chat that Katrina really is kind of just the love interest character in the original stories too. So like, it's not a surprise that, you know, they had to build on her in order to make her like more substantial for the movie. And she actually calls out, I don't know if either of you ever watched this, but the Sleepy Hollow television show that they did back on Fox, I think, a few years ago.
I have not seen it. So.
Which I thought was good. I watched the first 2 seasons. I thought it was going to be terrible. It actually ended up being like pretty good before it tailed off. But in that show, they have like another character who becomes the love interest. So Katrina actually becomes the villain, and Brahm becomes the headless horseman. So it's they play very loose with the mythology in that one, but it actually is it was an interesting show. Good performance by an actor named Tom Misen in the original in the role. But yeah, it's
when did that come
out? It was in the mid 2000s or mid 2010s. It ran for actually 4 seasons between 2013 and 2017. So
okay, so I don't feel quite as old with that. I never saw it, but I do remember when it was on, and I was like, please don't tell me that was an early 2000s show, because I might just die. No, and like, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they would have done with Katrina if this had been made more recently, because this is a, you know, almost 25-year-old movie, and it's kind of in line with what I would have expected from a late 90s movie, especially adapting from a story this old. But yeah, no, I say that, and some studio exec is probably thinking right now, like, yeah, we can. It's been long enough. We can redo Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll get back to it eventually, but I doubt it'll have quite the same unique charm as this one.
No, and I was actually thinking about it as I was watching it. It's like, it was so fun that the action climax of this movie is a big chase scene with stunts. Like, I was just like, I feel like we don't, you know, this is almost a thing of the past, where it's just, you know, the action climax of something like this is just so, you know, rooted in like old school Hollywood, you know, techniques. Although we do have a bit of, I'm sure there's small bits of CGI throughout the movie, and then of course a big amount of it when the Hessian gets his head back. But that's just, I was also going to say, when you said earlier that, you know, when he's actually headless, it's Ray Park, but yeah. So effective is Christopher Walken in the impression he makes on you that you just see him. Every time you see the headless horseman, it's it just in your head, you're like, oh, it's headless Christopher Walken. So, but yeah, and of course, this is back in the day when Ray Park was doing everything, you know, like, you know, if you needed somebody for like, you know, really great stunt work and a character with unique movements and stuff, Ray Park was involved. It was so great. But
yeah, no, it's great. Like it's great for us.
I know, Padar, I'm being slightly tongue in cheek there, but sometimes it does feel like it's not old school Hollywood, but it is old school. for for this modern age of every frame of a movie has CGI. So
yeah. Although it's interesting you mentioned it with the black and white thing. This movie actually, in keeping with the kind of classic like Hammer horror movies, if this movie feels like if you were to do a black and white version of it, it actually might be pretty cool because it kind of lives in that kind of color palette.
I don't think it would be all that different.
No, I don't think it would, but it might feel more.
Well, because but I'm saying that so much of the cinematography is veering on black and white. I think there's moments where there are certain parts in the movie that are just, if they're not black and white, they're just slightly a bit more color. And that's what I was saying though. But the blood in the movie is just a very bold red, so that makes it all the more impactful. But yeah, no, it's just, like we were saying before, the cinematography is just gorgeous.
And you were calling out the chase scene and the action sequences, which this movie does a really good job with the horse riding sequences, which are is important given that the main antagonist is the headless horseman, but I don't know if they actually shot it that fast or if they used some kind of, filmmaking technique, but they really managed to make the horseman feel like a truly unstoppable supernatural force, because when he's charging at his victims, he is going full speed. And when he pulls out his sword,
when he flips the sword,
and he pulls it out, he does the flip, and then he just with a single swing, takes off the heads. It makes you feel like he actually is that dangerous and that fast, and is truly the unstoppable force from hell. He is not of this world, so what could they possibly do to ever defeat him? And ultimately, they can't defeat him. They can just give him back what he had lost, and then he holds the oath fulfilled, and prances on back.
I think speaking of the action sequence and the unstoppable force that he is, I think the action scene of the fight with Brahm, and he's fighting with the tooth sides, and he is, Brahm is no weakling. He is a fighter, and even still, he just gets, get bisected, I guess, twice. But I think one of the best action scenes is, or that demonstrates what an unstoppable force is. It's not just a mindless killing machine. It's actually pretty clever. Is when they're outside, or when the horseman is outside the church, and he can't enter the church himself. Yard. So he figures out a way around it to claim the head that he's looking for, and it's pretty gruesome. So he goes spearfishing, basically.
Somebody should have said, "Get away from the windows! Get away from the windows!"
At that point, and they're all starting to, and Van Tassel is starting to suspect that he's been double crossed or something's going on, or between the other town leaders, the Reverend Steamwick and the Dr. Lancaster, I think it was, and they start blurting out some things that there was a conspiracy going on, and then it's but I think at that moment it's Van Tassel is the one who's actually now suspected of controlling the horseman, I think, at that point.
Yep. Yeah, because
now they're all all hell's broken loose, and they're all eyeing each other as possibly being responsible.
Because Lady Van Tassel has faked her death at this point. So
I love the fact that she's able to get away with that just by virtue of the fact that that her husband just ran away instead of waiting to see if she was dead or not. And the fact that she knows he's that much of a coward, that that's what's gonna happen. So great. Another thing I wanted to mention, like going back to the gore of this movie, the wonderful, wonderful gore is earlier when they get to the tree and there's blood coming out of the tree, and he takes the axe and starts and blood all over his face, and then the heads come out of the tree trunk. Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, so gloriously gruesome.
That was Tim Burton having a little bit of fun, because that scene goes on for a surprisingly long time of Johnny Depp's Ichabod Crane taking the little hatchet, and he hacks into the branches and gets a spurt of blood, kind of does this little, and then does it again and again and again and again and again, and eventually you're like, come on now. And then as soon as you think, okay, it's over, heads. Just heads.
Yep.
I'd forgotten that that's what was going on with the tree. I was like, I forget. Does like he cut into the tree, cut out a hole, and then go like underneath the tree or something? And I'm like, they're really taking a long time for him to get through the bark. and then I'm like, oh no, now I remember. But oh God, so much of this movie is just so wonderful, wonderfully gross, and
I probably like the most, I guess, more shocking, darker deaths they went to is when they, the horseman comes to the to murder the Killians. The midwife knew the secret. Yeah. And it just like the kid is hiding, and he's just this little doll-faced cherub kid. Yeah. And he's hiding under the floorboards, and he's already dealt with seeing his mother's eyes through the floorboards after she's been decapitated, and you think he might just get away, but then you see the horseman just stop at the door and realizes there's one more, and this poor kid, and you don't see anything. You just, after he's like, dragged up out of the floor, but the next thing you see is the horseman coming out of the house and just stuffing something into a bag, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, another
That's dark.
A less bold movie would not have done that. They would have had the scene where he kills the father who's heroically trying to defend his family. He kills the mother who's trying to protect her son, and you think, okay, that's it. But then they're like, no, we're going to take the kid too, and they mercifully don't show it. But like that was just a little bit extra of like, yeah, of course, like the demonic spirit from hell is not gonna spare this child just because it's convenient. So it's dark.
The child is a potential witness to.
It's like it cuts from him picking up the kid out of the floor to then cutting to Brom hearing it and turning around the horse, and you're like, okay, the kid's going to be all right. Brom's going to get there and distract, the horseman. No, because he's already walking out with all three heads. God, just so dark.
Yeah, I mean, at least Brom got to go out on a, he wasn't that terrible.
I don't know.
He wasn't that bad.
I mean, he was kind of a jerk. He was definitely jealous of the relationship between, or the eyes that Katrina was making at Ichabod. Turns out he was kind of probably right to be worried about that, because after he dies, she's kind of like, I mourned him. but that he does, even though he kind of bullies and terrorizes Ichabod above at the beginning, he's not an evil guy, and he actually tries to fight with Ichabod, and Ichabod tries to stand up for him. And if they had actually tried to, if they had been willing to let the horsemen go, then they would have, he would have lived. But he, I think, wanted to kind of prove himself the hero, and it didn't work out.
My favorite thing about that line from Katrina is just because it's like basically a version of he was a bit underwritten as a character, so I don't really care.
Yeah.
But speaking of the what's the Killians, the actor who plays Mr. Killian his name is Stephen Waddington, and I recognized him immediately from he's in Last of the Mohicans as well.
Where he also suffers a very gruesome fate.
But he gets a lot more to do in the movie. So at least, he gets a great sacrificial scene in Last of the Mohicans, whereas in this he's just kind of there, and then, oh no, your wife told you something that you you would have been better off not hearing. But oh well.
And they're kind of they're one of the few truly innocent families that you see in the carnage of the Horsemen, because the wife was just the midwife. She was helping to take care of the pregnant woman, but so she didn't necessarily need to die, but Lady Van Tassel's just burn all bridges, no witnesses. And we get a couple of those scenes where we see the father and the mother, and they have that loving scene where they're putting the kid to bed, and then they're kind of having that loving banter between the two of them. And then of course the Horseman comes, and that just kind of goes to underscore the kind of the horror of it. But they seem a very
it's like we're seeing a happy family. This does not fit with the movie overall, so they gotta die.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about it.
So, but I mean, I would think though that because Lady Van Tassel learned about the pregnancy from, I think, the midwife gossiping, and you got to fit. That is probably what set everything into motion, because once she realized that the widow Winship is pregnant and that she wants to get married to Van Garrett to protect her child's rights, then realizing there's another stream, this inheritance of vast wealth is going to go down, and realizing she probably has to start acting quickly. And the people that know about it, the ones that commit, the notary, the doctor, the reverend,
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I just have to say, I mean, we mentioned that there's all these great actors, but speaking of the notary, I just want to say it's a trip seeing Michael Gough in this movie, because he of course played Alfred in the Batman films, and that's probably about the only thing I really knew him from growing up. And so to see him in this, and he gets to utter such great lines like "taken by the horsemen, taken back to hell." But then he's just such a chicken shit when Ichabod goes to see him later.
Yeah.
He's like, "We didn't know."
Everyone has their fun in this movie, getting to play their kind of very getting to play very campy, over the top lines, and that's part of the charm of it. The literally when Miranda Richardson's Lady Van Tassel is unmasked and is setting the horsemen on them, she's just like, "Watch your heads," and you're like, okay, bumptious, I got that. Like, and the tagline for this movie is literally, I think you put it, "Heads will roll," and you're just like, that kind of lets you know what kind of tone the movie.
Oh, my favorite, yeah, and the campiness gets dialed up as the climax, is happening, and I just love when Masmid says, "Is he dead?" Johnny Depp says, "That's the problem. He was dead to begin with."
Yes.
So great.
I do love that they had a extremely campy, but the whole villain explains their whole plan in detail and motivations.
Yep, this movie came out, I forget exactly when The Incredibles came out. I think it was like 2004. This is 5 years before they started calling out the villains for monologuing. So she takes that monologue and she just spills.
I love a good monologue. Yes. I even love it when it's being done by the hero. One of my, it's part of the reason why I'm diverting off to another movie right now, but I freaking love the Knives Out movies, and especially Daniel Craig's big, long, explain the whole, plot, bit in the first one, because I just remember, because I had sort of figured out who the villain of that movie was, like before it was revealed. But the climax of that movie is still so much damn fun, because it's so fun watching Daniel Craig just explain everything. And so I love a good explain everything monologue.
I mean, now that you mentioned it, it does kind of have that gentleman sleuth vibe to it, with Ichabod's entry into the, I guess, private room of Van Tassel's private room, and all the town leaders are there gathered around to discuss this business about the horsemen and things like, so it starts off like, just Johnny Depp striding into the room and like, so, like, was it 4 victims or 5 victims, their heads,
decapitated,
down severed, or it's like the eyes are just going around the room, and it's just, it's a perfect scene like that.
And that's why you're looking at all these famous character actors, and you're like, which one of them did it?
Yeah.
I think they have similar inspirations in terms of, though, that kind of, as Trish says, the whole gentleman sleuth kind of genre. I actually could. It would be different, but I could see a version of this movie where with Benoit Blanc investigating the headless horseman, and what kind of witticisms would come out of his mouth, and then possibly Ichabod Crane in investigating the Knives Out murders might not be quite as fun, but I would like to see him get a load of Edwin Norton's character in the Glass Onion.
I think right now we've just come up with the next Knives Out mystery. If not a Sleepy Hollow version, then at least a period piece where it's in this realm, and like he's in full costume, but he's still got his wonderful Southern accent. Oh, God. But now that we say it, like, if they got to remake Sleepy Hollow, I vote for the Benoit Blanc version.
Yep.
Oh, God. Anything else we didn't talk about that you guys wanted to?
Oh, you didn't say anything about the film score.
Oh my God, we did.
Yeah, talk about the music, John. You don't do Danny Elfman dirty.
Oh my God, I feel like it's almost too late. I feel so guilty that I haven't mentioned him at all throughout.
Yeah, you got 6 minutes or so.
No, oh my God. It's just like, this is one of my favorite scores of his. And this is terrible because I even got out the deluxe soundtrack. Look, it's a freaking 4-disc set, and I still didn't talk about it. No, it's just gorgeous. I just, the whole thing, it's just so wonderfully creepy, and it's, you know, it's Danny Elfman, so it's like, it's wonderful that you know, it's got a, you know, full orchestra as you'd expect a Danny Elfman story. I just love how, like, it starts off in that well, we got the music in sort of the prologue section, but I'm really thinking about when Christopher Lee is saying, remember, Ichabod Crane, it is you who is now put to the test. And the music starts to creep in around then. It's like, you know, like very softly. And then it just builds, and it's like, you know, it's, and my favorite bit in that whole opening section is like when the final credit comes up, it says directed by Tim Burton, and the music really comes in loud right there, because it's like, yes, in case you haven't gotten the hint yet, this is a Tim Burton movie. But no, it's beautiful because it's got the creepy, like that creepy Tim Burton or Danny Elfman like horror, you know, movie vibe, but also then it's got the beautiful melodies, you know, especially in the scenes with Katrina and Ichabod, and it's just, you know, it just takes me back to another, you know, era of film scoring, because I feel like even today when Danny Elfman scores a movie, he doesn't really get to unleash in the same way that he does here, where it's like the glory days of, you know, Tim Burton and Danny Elfman working together, and just, yeah, I love how spooky the music is. It's really the best way I can put it, and yeah, it's great, and just the way it accompanies moments like, you know, scenes I've already mentioned, which is why I can't believe I didn't mention the score earlier, but like when we get the flashback of the Hessian, and, you know, and the really almost violent music, you know, as he's, you know, fighting off on horseback against all the soldiers and stuff, and then the weird almost like choral music as he's like going through the woods, and it, you know, it all adds to this wonderful vibe that is so, you know, it's like quintessential Tim Burton, and Danny Elfman always plays such a big part of that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an essential piece for the mood of this movie. Like, I love that the movie has the opening credit sequence where, you know, once Ichabod starts to go off towards Sleepy Hollow, like, we basically get our opening credit sequence, but it gets to play as kind of this kind of eerie journey into like the fog and mystery of the movie, with the way that the texts kind of look like ghosts that dissolve into it, and the score is playing throughout it. And by the time you actually reach the village, you feel like you've settled into the kind of tone that the movie's going to have for the rest of its run time. And then as it builds, as you said, it builds and builds and builds and becomes very grand and operatic all the way up to the moment when the climax, when they return the head to the Hessian horseman, and it becomes this like grand choral, like organ style music that just, you feel like they're like slamming down on the keyboards, and it's like unleash the gates of hell at the time, and then it settles back down, and we get,
well, it is that meme of the piano on the beach, flames
yes,
coming out of it. That's really Danny, when it's Danny Elfman teamed with Tim Burton. That is, you know, very apt. meme. But no, it's just, yeah, it's wonderful. And that opening credit sequence where you just basically you get an overture for the movie, and I don't, maybe I'm probably making a broad statement because maybe somebody would be able to list some movie in recent years that's proved me wrong, but it just seems like we don't get opening credit sequences like that anymore. It used to really be a common thing back in the day where you'd get all the credits in a very long drawn out sequence where where the score would be allowed to just envelop you and set the mood for the movie. And it's a sort of a de facto overture, it just, instead of being over a black screen, it's over some gorgeous cinematography. And I just feel like that's something that's fallen out of fashion in movies.
Yeah, it definitely has. There are films, I can't name one off the top of my head, maybe like one of the Tarantino films or something recently, where they will do it. Like I think maybe did the Hateful Eight do it?
The Hateful Eight, definitely.
Yeah, it's basically, but he was doing that as a very specific homage to that kind of style of filmmaking that you're talking about. Because I think the reason that we don't see it as much anymore is that, not to cast just broad aspersions on an audience, but I feel like people don't have the patience for it, or they feel like, so they're like, let's get them into the action and then we'll get to the credits, the stylized credits at the end before the post-credit scene that we're gonna stick in there. So this is really kind of an artifact of its time that they were able to take this long to get into the movie, and they don't open the movie with it. They have our opening scene with Martin Landau losing his head, and then our introduction to Ichabod before we get the opening credit sequence. But it is still very much a kind of allowing us to settle into the movie once the plot really gets going with Ichabod traveling to Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, it's interesting because even I was thinking even just a couple years later, as much as I will always, champion Howard Shore's gorgeous score to The Lord of the Rings, those films open up where you get like a couple of quick credits and then the title and then it dives in. But musically, I think Howard Shore was able to have his cake and eat it too by virtue of the fact that those films are a very score-heavy movie. So in a way, like the entire prologue sequence of Fellowship of the Ring is like a big overture that he gets to really, and then you got the Concerning Hobbits, section where he gets to continue that, and so but I think it was sort of an overall change that we were starting to see where creators of a movie really wanted to put the title up and then just dive into the story.
Yeah, and it also I feel like for this movie it works because it's kind of a slow settling into the tone of what the movie is. But in some cases, if it's not that, if it is more of a fast-paced action kind of movie, then perhaps watching an extended credit sequence might break the immersion or test the audience's patience. But it's a harder thing to pull off. But for this style of movie, which is very much in the style of the old classic horror movies where they would basically play the entire credits before the movie even started, it feels more appropriate. Works.
Yeah. But so anyway, I feel good. I feel good about what we just devoted to talking about the music. So I don't feel as guilty anymore. So yeah, unless you guys have anything else, I think we'll leave it there. I think we pretty much covered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's actually the movie's only an hour and 46 minutes long, and it moves pretty fast. It's not like a like sometimes we devote our time to these like long, like epic kind of style movies. This movie, like, it actually has, like, it's got a kind of a twisty conspiracy in the middle of it, but it burns through it pretty fast and gets to the end, and you get, by the time you get to the end, you almost feel like it was like they wrap everything up pretty quick with that last scene with them returning home.
Well, that's another foregone movie tradition of having movies that were only like an hour and 45 minutes long. Those days are behind us. Although I guess not so much maybe for smaller independent films, but it certainly feels like if it's a major release, you know, we've got, although even quote unquote independent, I guess given the amount of money spent on it, you wouldn't call it an independent, but the kind of filmmaking, we've got like Martin Scorsese movies now that are 3.5 hours long. So, and no, I am not dissing Martin Scorsese. I love Marty. So, in case anybody's thinking of sending mean emails my direction. You hear that, Pat R? I don't want any of that shit from you. No, so okay, so just wrapping up. Once again, next week, Jared and I will be talking about the Banshees of Inisherin, which I can't wait because it's been a long time coming for that one. And then we'll talk about what's coming a bit further down the line. I think I did add on to the schedule in a couple weeks. Speaking of long movies, Oppenheimer, because I know we talked about that as well. And once that comes out on Blu-ray and I can watch it again, we can definitely talk about that. And then we also talked about circling back around to the Hobbit trilogy, but taking a different approach, shall we say, than I did previously, where I did like a 5-hour stream on the entire trilogy. And it was a little snarky, a little too snarky. So I'd like to, I was thinking about tackling those again for December. And no, that's not happening, Pat. Oh, no, definitely not. So we'll do that. And I also want to carve out some time to do a stream on the Rings of Power television series as well. So we'll get to that as well. So we'll be busy for the next couple months. So aside from that, I know I asked you guys before, but if you want to mention anything you guys have going on, or anything you just wanted to bring up and talk about real quick here at the end. Go ahead.
Not really.
Nope. I'm just kind of chill. I'm waiting. Still hanging out on the website formerly known as Twitter. Mostly it's sports and movie takes. But I'm enjoying watching Tottenham Hotspur at the top of the EPL. Not so much most of my football teams, other than the Cowboys, who are doing okay. But I promise that it's not just sports. I'm still talking about Star Wars and other stuff there too. So, and I am enjoying looking forward to the Banshees of Inisherin next week. That's going to be
the other thing I was going to mention to you, Jared, because we talked about it probably not a couple weeks ago, but maybe because we had the time off, but maybe a couple weeks before the couple of weeks ago. I had mentioned that I was watching Star Trek Discovery, and you were thinking maybe that you were going to tackle that, or maybe even just buy the Blu-rays and watch it that way. But I will say I've now caught up with the whole series, and I freaking love it. So I would absolutely recommend it. I think that I enjoyed the whole show, but especially once it hits season 3, I feel like seasons 3 and 4 were where they really hit their stride, because the story takes a turn at that point. And I won't say any more than that because I'll leave it for you whenever you get to it. But yeah, my only disappointment is that apparently season 5 is going to be their last season, and I'm like, no, give us more. But
yeah, I am looking for new. That show has been on my list forever. So is Picard, honestly. But I need an excuse to actually start and invest in a new TV show, rather, because I find myself when I don't, just drifting back to the old favorites, So, which is nothing wrong with that, but like at a certain point, if I'm going to watch Hannibal or Game of Thrones for the 12th time, I might as well branch out a little bit.
Well, if you end up going back to Game of Thrones, just let me know about it, and we'll do some more watch parties.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I'm gonna annoy everybody right now by saying it was a while ago now, quite a long length of time ago. But when we did our season 8 rewatch, I had an absolute blast because we got to sit there and just enjoy it and not listen to anybody's snarky comments, and it was so much fun. So. I'm game for that again if you want to do that.
Any time, my friend. And Potter, I have not seen The Expanse, although that is high on my list because I know that Steph loves that show as well. And I watched the pilot and loved it, and I just didn't have time to continue. But I've got several seasons waiting for me.
Well, the complete series is about to drop on Blu-ray because they had yet to release seasons 5 and 6. And I think this month they're releasing a box set of all 6 seasons for, I don't think it's that expensive, all things considered. I think the whole thing is going to be about like $70 or so, which for 6 seasons is not a bad deal. So I'm just saying, just throwing that out there for you. And they're about to release collector's editions of the 2nd and 3rd books in December, which I'm going to pick up because I haven't gotten into the books yet, and I have a fancy edition of book 1. And so I think now that I'm going to have the first 3 books in beautiful hardcover, I think it's probably time for me to dive in. But yeah, so anyway, I don't even know where I was going anymore, but but plenty of TV shows to watch, Jared, and get into. Thank you, Trish, so much for joining us, both for the last stream and for tonight as well. Just had a blast, and we're going to coach you back in when the timing works out for Laura to come on to talk about aliens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if we ever circle back to The Witch, I think that would be another great one.
Oh yeah, we could definitely do that.
That might actually might see where we can fit that in on the schedule, because I'm like, right now I'm so in the zone for that I'm like, that can be in the not too distant future, because it's so great, and yeah, we could talk forever and ever about about that one, because it's so messed up. About The Expanse pattern. Yeah, I know lots of people sing the praises of the books, and just knowing that I know there's definitely differences from the series, but I am looking forward to a more expanded telling of the story, especially for the last couple seasons, and of course the books go beyond what the show did. So yeah, I'm hoping that this is one of those things where I've been procrastinating getting to the books, but I'm once I start them, I'm hoping that I won't be able to stop, and I'll just start speeding through them. So, all right. Thank you, everybody who tuned in to watch, and for everybody who comes to it later, thank you very much. And thank you guys for this talk. I had a blast.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. And anyway, hope you all have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Take care.